A pivot is, by my definition, okay, it's moving you into a different direction.
Okay.
He had this idea of, so like a food truck, he had a trailer, and instead of selling meals, he was going to sell organic vegetables. And he made a big pivot. You ready for this? He sold the trailer.
Got rid of the old
He sold the trailer.
Welcome to the Live Truly Free podcast, where we provide fatherly guidance to entrepreneurs at any level of their journey. Hi, I'm George Black, and this is AJ. Are you ready for this week's adventure of building great companies and discovering the Live Truly Free lifestyle for entrepreneurs? Awesome, let's get started.
So George, last week we were talking about navigating through headwinds, and we kind of focused on finding your passions and just sticking onto those as you fight through the headwinds. So
right.
that means like when those thoughts of, oh, I don't think this is going to work, or this isn't going the way I planned, you kind of just, you have that thought for a second, and then the next second you forget about it, you break your agreement with failure, and you keep moving on toward working towards your passions.
Right.
So that's what we talked about last week. And I've been sitting on this a while, thinking through this. And I was like, is there another way, maybe easier, or maybe that's not even the right word, but where you can just kind of pivot a little bit? So instead of going directly at the headwind, you kind of just make a little bit of a pivot. So maybe the wind is going behind you a little more and it makes things easier.
Right. Okay. All right. So that's a whole lot. Let's break that apart a little bit. So first of all, let me clarify. Your passions are like gas in the tank. Mm-hmm. So when we're feeling headwinds, so think economic downturn, think market conditions, a competitor opens up next door to you, all those sort of things. Okay. It's your passions that keep you sustained through all of that, but it's not how you get through.
Okay. So your passion is kind of just like an internal factor, whereas like the actual tangible, what is my business doing, isn't necessarily just like, I love this thing, this is what we're doing.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, no, we got some more layers to bring in on this.
Okay. So passion's kind of just for you as an entrepreneur to cling on to, but your business is going to need some other strategies or tactics in order to succeed.
Well, yeah, but sometimes it may be you're hanging on, like clinging on for dear life, but a lot of times it's why you're getting up every day. It's what you love to do, and that's contagious to all the people around you, whether it's other employees or partners or vendors or customers, particularly customers.
Okay. And so when you have these passions, and this is what's getting you up in the day,
right?
You hit a headwind,
right?
And your business is like, oh, the direction we're going in right now is not exactly what we need to be going in to be successful. How do you know when that moment happens and when you have to pivot? Okay.
Yeah. So this is super important that you need to map your direction. And actually it's the subtitle of my book, The Next Level Entrepreneur, which is focus your passion. So you got to have your passions really focused, and then you've got to map your direction. So you can't pivot off of what you don't know where you're headed. Yeah. And we talked about that. So metrics are not direction, like more sales are not direction. So you got to have a direction. Mm-hmm. So if you've got a headwind coming at you, right. So the concept is, well, could I somehow pivot in a way to get that headwind giving me a little push from behind, right?
Yeah. Can you give me an example of a pivot?
Yeah. Because this happens a lot. In fact, I have a theory that most startups will pivot 2 to 3 times in the first, 12 to 18 months, something like that. And the reason is that you've put together your best ideas and everything like that, but until you get into the actual business and you're depending on it to make money, you really don't know. So a great example is a friend of mine. Okay. He had this idea of, so like a food truck, he had a trailer, and instead of selling meals, he was going to sell organic vegetables. It was a beautiful trailer. It had counters all the way around it. He could be, and his team could be inside the trailer working the counter, and they had refrigeration on it. They had all kinds of stuff. And the idea was go to dense high dense populated areas like a office park or something like that, and start to develop customers, and they would just go on a route. So every Wednesday they were at, this office building.
Okay.
And people would come out and they put flyers up or whatever, and people would come buy their organic vegetables. So that was their overall strategy and things like that. And it worked really well right out of the gate. And it was phenomenal. No one had ever seen any of this. The trailer was incredible. The food was awesome. He was buying from all these farm fresh sources. It was really, so there was a whole wonderful ecosystem that went around this.
Yeah.
The only problem was it wasn't producing enough revenue to overcome the costs.
Okay.
Or he might have been making a little bit of money, but it was just, the problem was it was a little bit of money.
Because I imagine the refrigeration and paying for gas in the trucks and driving around.
Right. And then he still needed a place. Well, then he discovered, I need a warehouse or something where I can pull the food together and load the truck up and that sort of thing. So one of the things he did was he goes, well, maybe we can expand our business by letting people pre-order before we get there. So he did that. All right. That's all in line with strategy.
And so would that pre-order, would that be considered a pivot?
No. Because all he did was say, hey, look, we're going to be there on Wednesday at noon. You can send us your order online, and we'll have it ready for you. And so all you got to do is just come to the trailer and pick it up.
Okay, so it's just kind of an additional service, not necessarily.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it was just a way to try to expand, because you knew if they came out to the trailer, they go, oh, give me some of those while I'm here too.
Yeah.
So that's what he was going for. Still not enough revenue. So this is where he makes his first pivot. So his business is the trailer business. A pivot is, by my definition, okay, it's moving you into a different direction, which would be a different business.
Okay.
But a pivot is still building off of what your core thing is. So he's got this small warehouse and stuff going. So he figures, we're going to offer home delivery.
Okay.
Of the same vegetables we have on the trailer. And so they started a home delivery business while also doing the trailer. That's a pivot.
Okay. And this is before like Uber Eats, DoorDash times, right?
Oh yeah. This is what? Yeah. This is way before any of that.
Okay.
He's a thought leader in that whole.
Yeah.
If Sean watches this, it's like, dude, you missed out on $1 billion opportunity.
Mm-hmm. It's just a matter of timing.
Yeah, just timing. That's all it was. Don't beat yourself up.
And so he makes this pivot to going, he was still going to the business parks, correct?
Right.
But he's like, I'm going to add this other area of my business where I'm going to start delivering it directly to these people's homes.
Right. It didn't really cost him. It didn't require anything logistically more than having some drivers and cars.
Okay. What did he, marketing wise, did he have to make a significant pivot there as well to get those delivery customers?
I don't remember, but I think it was so he's building up a customer base like at the office park.
Yeah.
And so, and then there was a word of mouth. He had a big Facebook group, as I recall.
Okay.
And so it just kind of, it was more organic, and it was an organic business, right? But it was more that kind of marketing. So okay. I don't think there was a big push on it. And I think maybe people had started requesting it anyhow. So it was kind of like this was coming from customers. Mm-hmm. And so it seemed a natural thing to do, but it's a different direction.
Okay. And did that shift in direction, did that change the financial metrics of the company to where he needed it to be in terms of revenues?
Okay. Yeah. It helped.
Okay.
But it then became just logistically, you're driving all over the city, potentially. So he couldn't confine himself to one area, where the trailer followed a route. Mm-hmm. And they did the same thing every week, or they would add, another location or whatever.
Yeah.
So it definitely increased the volume, but it didn't, but the logistics and costs, he still wasn't getting ahead.
Okay. So then did he have to pivot a third time or
Yep.
completely change his strategy in order to make this work?
Okay, so here, there's a difference between strategy and pivoting.
Okay. I thought they were kind of the same. I thought you just pivoted your strategy. No?
Well, no. So where do you want to go? Do you want to go to the third pivot first and then come back to strategy, or do you want to go to?
Let's go to let's go to the strategy and pivot difference. I'm kind of interested in that.
Okay, all right, okay. So here's the thing: the pivot is I'm going to go into a separate but parallel kind of business. So it's not like he shifted completely out of the vegetable delivery service. He expanded it. He did expand his offering, so he included some meats and things like that. But he didn't go to like tech or software as a service or something.
Yeah.
You know.
He didn't build an app for the delivery.
Right,
Okay.
right, yeah. So the thing is that, but it was still a different direction. Okay.
Yeah.
But strategy. So let's go back to the headwinds. So you've got a headwind, and a headwind is basically what I call a success barrier. And I talk about it in my book. And actually, I don't just talk about it, I give an illustration of it. So the whole third part of the book is how to map your direction and build a great company.
I guess I'm still a little. I'm still feeling a little confused on like definition, strategy, pivot.
Okay.
If you could just clarify that much, I think that's kind of the last thing I'm needing to tie all this together.
Like the difference, when's a strategy, and when's a pivot?
Yes.
So let me go back to it was also called Truck and Tomato, which this is the difference. So their strategy was, we want to try to sell vegetables to the direct consumer. So it was a direct thing. Mm-hmm. And so they did a small pivot, like I just said, of taking it to home delivery.
Yeah.
Well, in that process, Sean began to figure out that he was, he found restaurants wanted the same service. Mm-hmm. So he started just kind of naturally, okay. And they were nearby his warehouse area. So he started supplying them. And then he realized that was the way he could make it in this business.
Okay.
And he made a big pivot. And the big pivot was he went to selling direct to restaurants.
Got it.
And you ready for this? He sold the trailer.
Got rid of the old
He sold the trailer, and and then he wound down the home delivery, and it ended up being over $1 million business in just a year or two, and then a bigger group came in and bought him out.
Okay.
And he went to work for the bigger group.
Okay. I think that ties it together nicely then. Okay. So I'm thinking, so a pivot is like you're kind of making small changes within your same business area of expertise, going from I'm going to be at your work to I'll deliver it to your house.
Right.
That's just a small pivot. And I guess you could maybe say like a pivot could be like a huge pivot would be where you get into like a strategy change. And they're not even really the same.
Well, a direction change.
Yeah. You're changing directions is where the strategy changes.
Right. So he's still in his core business, and this is what you want to understand, is that's why it's a pivot and not a completely new business.
Yeah.
So a pivot is within the direction you're headed.
Yeah.
So he's still selling organic vegetables, but his original direction was direct from the farm to the consumer.
Yeah.
Now, the pivot is still, because he has a fantastic, and this is why restaurants bought from him, he had a fantastic network of farmers and direct, I mean, literally, he's going through their fields and looking at their stuff. Mm-hmm. So he's buying straight from the farm, and these high-end restaurants love it. And so, but he couldn't get the volume with the direct-to-consumer and make the margins work.
Yeah.
But he could with the restaurants. And so, does this make sense? He's still in his core business, but the pivot was he went from direct to consumer to restaurants.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So he changed, like he stayed with that core passion,
Right,
But he just funneled it. Instead of going direct to consumer, you can call that north.
Right.
He then decided, I'm going to go south and go B2B. And so that's a complete change of strategy,
Right.
but it's still within his core competency. It's still within his passion, and it's still virtually the same business if you boil it down to one sentence, selling organic vegetables. Now, but the only thing that
Direct from the farm.
direct from the farm, but the only thing that changed is who he's selling it to and the method he's selling it, which is a huge change for a business. But for him personally, he's kind of still in where he wants to be.
Right. So a completely different business would have been if he decided to open up a grocery store.
Yeah.
That's a brick and mortar, he had a physical warehouse, but it's a retail, it's a completely different kind of business than what he was doing.
Okay.
And even though he might still be selling organic vegetables, to make a grocery store work, you're going to have a bunch of other stuff there and other products and things like that. So that would be, okay, you're doing something completely different.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
You clarified it perfectly. And I think this would be helpful. It's helpful for me, at least, in being able to contextualize, staying within the passion, staying within the core business, but knowing the difference between pivot and strategy. Because ideally you want to keep that same strategy, unless like his P&L statements, they weren't looking how he needed them to.
Right.
So if that's the case, then you need to switch strategy. But if it's just minor, like we can add a little more revenue line here, we can cut a couple costs here, that's just minor pivots helping you get in that same direction, but go further in that direction. And so to kind of wrap this up for everybody here, I just wanted to ask this last question. How long of a time did it take him to make these two pivots from direct to the home to now I'm going to go to businesses?
Okay. Probably less than 2 years.
Less than 2 years?
Yeah.
Okay. So what you're saying is pivots are pretty rare.
Yes.
And these were in the beginning, and then he was just stayed fully with that direct to the business model for indefinitely, right?
Right. Well, not indefinitely, because actually he was so successful
that he sold,
that he was offered a buyout. Yeah. So
the pivots are rare, and then eventually, once you make your pivots to get you in the position you want to be in, then they kind of dwindle off, if you would say. But strategy is kind of always moving, because it depends on the success barriers and those change constantly.
So I have two categories of strategies, and so I call them next step strategies, which really go for 6 to 12 months. Then you refresh them.
Okay.
And then next level strategies are 3 to 5 years, and you will refresh those annually. So strategies are how to overcome the success barriers or the headwinds. Okay. You see?
Yeah. Now this makes perfect sense to me.
Okay.
Now I have a background for how to navigate headwinds a little bit better and kind of map out the direction I want to go in.
Right. So basically the pivots, which is what we're really talking about here, is something that occurs early on in a company and then occasionally as you're going along.
Okay.
Unless there's major problems and things like that. But typically, if you're doing well and you're continuing to have success, you're probably not going to pivot.
Yeah.
Because you're in your passion.
Yeah. And it's working.
Yeah. So I really hope this helps, guys, because what we're hoping you get from this is our ideas to lead your own business. And one thing I think AJ pointed out here was notice how my friend led with his numbers. So he's looking at his numbers and realizing he's not getting ahead like he needed to make the business work. And knowing your numbers, leading from that, that's something we can spend a lot more time on some other time. But put your questions down in the comments or topic ideas, because we'd love to hear what you've got for ideas. And for more conversations like this with AJ, check out this video right here. I know you're going to love it. And in the meantime, may you live truly free.